I'm David Roberts. I'm British American. I haven't actually lived anywhere for almost 10 years. But I grew up in the United States. And then I traveled to, before COVID, about 50 countries a year. And let's see, I'm a scientist and an engineer. And I was an atheist for the first half of my life, to a really extreme extent. I remember even in high school being God for Halloween, which gives you an idea of how I thought about it. I had a very privileged childhood. Father was a doctor and a businessman, and my mother was a nurse, and they had impressed on me all the time to be compassionate and to help people that were suffering. And my idea of suffering for all of my life until an event earlier this year was that it was people that were lacking in resources, people that were starving, that didn't have clean water, that were in poverty, that didn't have health care. And so I spent most of my life trying to eradicate that lack. And then earlier this year, I went to an event and I listened to Sri Pritaji speak. And it was a 4-day event. And she described a very different idea of suffering. And in that idea of suffering, I realized that I was suffering, which is, there's some irony in it. It would be almost like someone whose occupation was helping people to quit smoking. And then they discover one day that they're a chain smoker. And Sri Pritaji invited me to India for the Tapas event. And on the 10th day of being here, it hit me. All at once. And I understood what caused all of my suffering, my entire life. And now I feel free. But for anyone who thinks they don't suffer, I think there's some things to learn. But for anyone who thinks that their suffering might never end, I'm just one point, but it's very clear to me that I don't think I could really suffer again, or at least not for very long. And I never imagined that to be possible. I think what I didn't understand before was that suffering is this process. It's happening, this recursive process happening in my mind. Something happens and then I'm thinking about it afterward in a way that is not productive or even conducive to happiness. And as these things build up over time, in some ways, my mind was very busy, and I can look back and probably say that much of my achievements in life were out of getting my mind to constantly be thinking about all these things. And maybe what I didn't realize was that this constant thinking about all these other things robs you of the moment that you're in. And your life is nothing more than a series of these moments. And so if your mind is always somewhere else, your whole life is being robbed by yourself. And even having a whole life of this habitual process happening, even once I realized it, I did not know how to stop it. And I did not think it would be possible to stop because I'd been doing it my whole life. But once it starts to stop, there's an incredible peacefulness that's left there. And the challenge that I was having before was that I wanted my mind to be focused on love, not on removing suffering. And I realized yesterday that when I removed all of my suffering, the only thing left was love. And so I see the world differently. I hear the birds. I see the flowers. I can smell the flowers. And while that happened before, I wasn't present to it. And so it was just something happening in the background that would be distracting me from these recursive suffering thoughts. And so now, there's just this quietness. And it's very beautiful. And all of the questions that I had before, like what is the purpose of life? All those questions, they don't even make sense to me anymore. So it's incredible to go through life, a whole life, and not have had that insight. And not even have believed that I'll call it an insight, was possible. And so now I'm very grateful, and I realize I could never have gotten there by myself. And so I'm very grateful to Sri Krishna Ji, Sri Krishna Ji, the universe, the people here at Ecom, my fellow, I'll call them tapas adventurers, seekers. But I would never have gotten here. Not in 1,000 years without them. So thank you.